My husband Ethan's childhood sweetheart, Vanessa, always loved to steal my things. After being reborn, I realized that I'd never be able to compete with her even if I fought until death. So I simply put price tags on all my personal belongings. She used her motion sickness as an excuse to always sit in my husband's passenger seat. I stuck a payment QR code right on the front passenger seat. $100,000 for annual membership, 20% off for renewals. She took a liking to my project proposal. The moment my husband Ethan knocked on my office door, I spoke without even looking up. $500,000. Transfer it, and I'll change the name to hers immediately. On our son's birthday, I pushed aside my work and rushed to the kindergarten to pick him up. But he looked up at the teacher and said, "She's not my mom. I won't go with her." As we stood at an impasse, Vanessa arrived late, holding the gift I'd prepared for my son. My son immediately rushed over and hugged her legs. "Teacher, look carefully. This is my real mom." My husband was about to explain. I looked at my son expressionlessly and extended my hand. $5 million. I'll have you adopted to her today. Ethan looked at me in disbelief. "Isabel, are you seriously taking out your anger on our son? He's only 4 years old. Know when to stop." A flash of shock crossed my son's face when he heard my words. Then his little face flushed red, and he hugged Vanessa's legs even tighter. $5 million then. I don't want you as my mean mom anyway. So in his eyes, the me who woke up 2 hours early every day to prepare nutritious breakfasts for him, who gave up promotion opportunities just to spend more time with him, I was this hateful. Vanessa busied herself playing the good person, trying to smooth things over. "Ryan, I taught you not to be this rude." My son pouted unhappily. "She's rude too. The day before yesterday when Dad was with you, she kept calling and bothering Dad. Auntie also taught me to fight fire with fire against bad people." Ethan's expression suddenly changed. "Isabel, that day was because Vanessa." I cut him off with a raised hand. "You spent our wedding anniversary with her. That costs money too." Ethan froze in place, as if he suddenly didn't recognize me. After a long moment, he pulled out a card from his wallet and threw it directly on the ground. "Isabel, even your own son hates you. You really should look for the reason in yourself." He put his arm around Vanessa and got in the car. The exhaust sprayed all over my head and face. I just silently crouched down and picked up the bank card from the ground. The pain of the card's corners digging into my palm only strengthened my resolve to do this. After all, in my past life, when Ethan let Vanessa steal my things, I cried and made scenes. Not only did I fail to win his love, but my mother's burial plot was given away by him to Vanessa, just to bury her pet dog. In a fit of rage, I slapped Vanessa and angrily demanded a divorce from Ethan. I thought this would make him realize his mistake. Who knew that to teach me a lesson? He actually agreed directly. He even hired a top divorce lawyer and exploited loopholes to have me leave with nothing. A few days after the divorce, I had a sudden heart attack. I couldn't even afford to call an ambulance. I struggled to crawl to the hospital. Facing the astronomical medical bills, I had no pride left. I called Ethan over and over again. Not only did he not answer, he even had Vanessa use his phone to send me voice messages. "Isabel, you willingly gave me this man. There's no taking him back." Desperately waiting for life-saving money, all I got in the end were her photos showing off. In the final moments of my life, I watched helplessly as Vanessa wore my bathrobe, sprayed my favorite perfume, and kissed my husband on the clean silk bedding I had washed. In this new life, without love, at least I could get enough money to save my own life. I just never expected that my son, whom I couldn't let go of in my past life, would also turn against me for Vanessa. Before I could feel sad, my phone suddenly rang. It was a call from the doctor. "Ms. Sullivan, we've successfully matched a heart for you. We can schedule the surgery for next month." Hearing this good news, my legs went weak and I had to lean against the wall to barely stay standing. In this life, I finally wouldn't die desperately in a hospital corridor. Just as I hung up, Ethan sent me a message. "My attitude earlier was bad. I promised you before to redo our wedding ceremony. The designer delivered the custom wedding dress to the house. Can you come back and try it on?" I didn't reply to him, nor did I refuse. 5 years ago when I married Ethan, his family had just gone bankrupt and was too poor to even afford a wedding. Back then, I firmly believed he was capable and would make a comeback someday, that he would give me a grand wedding that everyone would envy. Who knew that after he actually became successful, a Vanessa would appear to steal his attention and our son's affection? I still hadn't gotten that wedding to this day. When I got home and pushed open the door, I saw Ethan and our son surrounding Vanessa in a wedding dress, praising her endlessly. Catching sight of me at the door, Ethan's smile froze on his face. He quickly walked up to me and reached out to embrace me. "Isabel, here's the thing. Vanessa's mother doesn't have much time left. Her biggest wish before passing is to see Vanessa get married. Vanessa still doesn't have a boyfriend. I plan to first pretend to hold a wedding with her. Your wedding will have to be postponed." I stared at Vanessa. The wedding dress that had been custom-made to my measurements fit Vanessa, who who was a head shorter than me, perfectly. Vanessa pretended to speak weakly. Ethan, maybe we should just forget it. After all, Isabel has been waiting for 5 years. I feel bad about this. She made a show of trying to take off the dress but was stopped by my son. He crashed into me like a cannonball. Bad woman. You must be jealous that Auntie looks like a fairy in the wedding dress. Your stomach looks like old tree bark. Nothing looks good on you. I was knocked hard to the ground, too pained to recover for a long time. Seeing my pained expression, my son felt a bit guilty, but he still stood there with his neck stiff. Ethan rushed over to pull me up. Ryan, why did you push Mommy? His gaze fell on my abdomen, his expression somewhat reluctant. Isabel, if you really mind, I'll have someone else pretend with Vanessa. I shook off his hand and stood up by myself. I don't mind. I opened my phone calculator. Besides the wedding and the dress, I need to add the money for your wedding night with her. Before I could finish calculating, Ethan slapped my phone out of my hand. Isabel, are you sick? Ryan is right here. Vanessa and I are completely innocent. I really don't understand how you became like this. I looked up at him. She wants to steal everything I have. I can't compete with her, so asking for some monetary compensation is wrong too. Ethan was speechless. His chest heaved violently, as if he was extremely angry with me. I can't be bothered to argue with you. He pulled out his phone and jabbed at the screen as if venting. The next second, a deposit notification popped up on my phone. I must have been blind back then. Ethan pulled the two of them out and slammed the door so hard it shook. I looked at the string of zeros on the screen, desperately holding back my spinning tears. When I first got together with Ethan, he had nothing. I shared a discounted hamburger with him and lived in a dark, damp basement. Back then, he often felt indebted to me. After work, he'd deliver food just to earn extra money to buy me cakes that other girls loved. When I casually mentioned that clothes were hard to dry, he spent half a month's salary to buy me a small dryer. When I caught him drinking cold water in the middle of the night to fill his stomach, I cried out of heartache. But he just held me tighter and choked up, saying I had suffered with him, vowing to compensate me well once he had money. But after he turned his life around, every single thing he tried to compensate me with was stolen by Vanessa. Now I was just fighting for some financial compensation for myself, and in return I must have been blind. I tried to take deep breaths and scrolled through my phone to distract myself. But my social media feed was full of posts from Vanessa. Ethan had taken her to discuss wedding plans. The venue renderings she posted were the exact version I had carefully refined bit by bit according to my own preferences. I never imagined that the wedding I'd looked forward to for so long would end up benefiting my own husband and another woman. I gripped my phone tightly and was about to block her. But my eyes inadvertently caught sight of her wrist. When I saw clearly what she was wearing, I couldn't hold back anymore. I rushed straight to her location. Give me back my bracelet. I lunged at Vanessa, trying to snatch back the bracelet. This was the only keepsake my mother left me. I'd carefully preserved it all these years. I couldn't even bear to touch it more than necessary. I never thought Vanessa would steal this too. Before I could get close, my son suddenly pushed me down. He spread his arms wide, firmly blocking Vanessa. I gave it to Auntie. Name your price. I'll transfer the money now. My son raised his phone watch, making a show of scanning my QR code to pay. I was so shocked I couldn't even feel the pain. Looking at my son, I felt my hands and feet go numb. Ryan, what did you just say? My son impatiently repeated. I asked you how much. Isn't everything for sale if the price is right? Just name your price already. I felt like someone had suddenly squeezed my heart tight. I couldn't even breathe. When my son was still at the age where he could barely speak clearly, I had shown him this bracelet. I told him that this bracelet was a symbol of his grandmother, that my mother was gone forever, and I could only think of her through this object. Back then, his small body had buried itself in my arms as he consoled me in his baby voice. Mommy still has Ryan. And now, wearing the phone watch I bought him, he wanted to buy my most treasured possession to give away. Vanessa pretended to take it off. I'm sorry, Isabel. Ryan said you never wore it, so I thought you didn't want it anymore. Ethan, who had been negotiating with the wedding staff, heard the commotion and hurried over. Seeing Vanessa's motion to remove the bracelet, he immediately looked at me with displeasure. Isabel, what are you making a fuss about now? It's just a bracelet. Your hands are too thick to wear it anyway. It would just sit there unused. What's wrong with letting Vanessa wear it? I finally couldn't hold back and shouted. That's my mother's keepsake. Vanessa, you even want to steal this? Aren't you afraid my mother will come find you at night? Hearing my words, Ethan's face showed some embarrassment. It's fine, Vanessa. Give it back to her. I'll buy you a new one. Wearing a dead person's things is unlucky. My son immediately chimed in. Right. Let Dad buy you a bigger, prettier one. With that, he took the bracelet Vanessa had removed and threw it directly at me. Don't throw it. I reached out in shock to catch it, but could only watch helplessly as the bracelet fell heavily to the ground, shattered into pieces. In that instant, I felt like a part of me shattered with it. I knelt on the ground, desperately picking up the fragments, tears falling heavily on the floor. Stop picking them up. Catching sight of the bloody cuts on my hand, Ethan frowned and reached out to pull me up. It's just an object. Is it really worth it? I swatted away his hand, my eyes bloodshot. I slapped the divorce agreement I'd prepared long ago onto his face. No need, Ethan. Let's get DIV. Ethan misunderstood, thinking the divorce agreement was a stock transfer agreement. He gripped the document, his face cold. Isabel, asking for money isn't enough for you now? You're even setting your sights on the company? I bet you deliberately let our son take the bracelet, using my guilt to get company shares, right? He sneered and signed his name without even looking. What great scheming. I won't hold it against you this time. But I won't tolerate you using the same tricks a second time. He flung the documents at me and walked away without looking back. I sat on the ground, watching the papers scatter everywhere, and laughed bitterly. He didn't know there wouldn't be a next time. I didn't want him or our son anymore. In the following days, I spent every day at the hospital. The money Ethan compensated me with was not only enough for my surgery, but also covered all the subsequent follow-up examinations and care. After successfully getting the heart transplant, I could completely rewrite the tragedy of my past life and begin anew. Finally, on the day of surgery, as I waited for anesthesia, the doctor suddenly took off his gloves. I'm sorry, Miss Sullivan. Your surgery can't be performed today. My heart tightened. What do you mean? Why can't it be done? Although I'd used the best medicine for myself, myocardial disease had always been dangerous. Just during the waiting period for surgery, I'd had no fewer than 3 episodes. The most serious time, I nearly died. I was pushed into the emergency room for a full 12 hours. Only through an intense will to survive did I pull through. My body had no time left to wait. The doctor looked troubled. The heart you were matched with was just reassigned. I clutched my chest desperately. Reassigned? By whom? Did they pay you more money? Whatever they're paying, I'll double it. The doctor didn't dare respond at all. He put on his mask and tried to escape. I rolled off the operating table and followed closely behind him, nearly breaking down. You know my condition. I can't wait any longer. How can you just reassign it like that? This is no different from murder. My screaming soon attracted many people. I roared. Who exactly stole my heart? Can rich people control other people's lives? The onlookers were indignant and soon found the instigator. I rushed over recklessly, but the moment I saw clearly, all the blood in my body froze. It was Ethan. He was blocking the operating room entrance, not letting anyone break in. Vanessa, crying at his side, saw me and immediately grabbed my arm. Isabel, are you saying my mom stole your heart? She fell to her knees directly in front of me. I was wrong before for always taking your things. I'm sorry. I apologize to you. Take out any grievances you have on me, but please spare my mother, okay? Ethan's expression immediately changed. Isabel, just because you don't have a mother, you want to make Vanessa lose hers too? How can you be so vicious? My nails dug deeply into my palms, my teeth nearly drawing blood. Ethan, her mother has cancer. A heart transplant won't cure it at all. Vanessa is deliberately. Before I could finish, Vanessa suddenly started kowtowing to me. Isabel, I'll return everything to you. I'll never bother Ethan and Ryan again. I'm really begging you. How much money do you want? I'll give you money, okay? My whole body went cold. I was so angry I could barely speak clearly. Who wants your money? I want the heart. Give me back the heart. Enough. Ethan flew into a rage and grabbed me. To harm Vanessa's mother, you even faked an illness and used people's sympathy to cause trouble. Isabel, this time you've really gone too far. He called security and had me dragged out directly. I struggled desperately but couldn't break free no matter what. My heart also beat more and more violently, my chest hurting so much it felt like it would explode. When I was thrown to the hospital entrance, a suffocating sense of near death swallowed me whole. I painfully reached out my hand to call for help, but the onlookers spat at me. Bah. We almost let you trick us into harming someone. Still acting even now. My hand fell powerlessly. In my last moment of consciousness, I only hoped that in my next life, I would never, ever see Ethan again. On the other side, after completing the surgery for Vanessa's mother, Ethan rushed to hold a wedding with Vanessa without stopping. But when exchanging rings, his mind was full of images of Isabel. That day at the hospital, she had looked very haggard. He was still somewhat worried. Sorry, Vanessa. Let's end the ceremony here for now. Auntie is already confused. She probably won't suspect anything. With that, he pulled off his boutonniere and called his assistant. Check Isabel's medical records. 10 minutes later, the assistant called back, his voice somewhat apprehensive. Mr. Harrison, the records show that Mrs. Harrison has acute myocardial disease. The heart transplant surgery was scheduled for a week ago. The heavy glass doors of the grand wedding hall seemed to block out the rest of the world, but they could not block out the sudden freezing draft that swept through Ethan's veins. The white boutonniere pinned to his chest, composed of rare white roses that Vanessa had insisted upon, suddenly felt like a lead weight. Mr. Harrison? The assistant's voice on the other end of the line was trembling, so hard that the words seemed to stumble over one another. Are you still there? The hospital. The private medical records of Mrs. Harrison show that she was diagnosed with acute myocardial disease 6 months ago. She was on the urgent transplant list. The donor heart that arrived last week. It was her perfect match. Ethan's hand tightened around the phone. The screen groaned under the pressure of his grip. What do you mean her match? Ethan's voice was low, a raspy growl that barely carried across the quiet aisle of the chapel. She faked it, Vanessa said. Vanessa said Isabel used her connections to steal the heart from her mother. She said Isabel was doing it out of spite. No, sir, the assistant gasped, his voice filled with a mounting, desperate panic. The medical board's investigation is being launched right now. The matching database is automated and encrypted. It is impossible to manually override it without board-level clearance, which you provided when you signed the emergency waiver as a major donor of the hospital. You personally overrode Mrs. Harrison's priority status to assign the heart to Vanessa's mother. Ethan's gaze slowly drifted to the altar. Vanessa was standing there, her delicate hands holding a bouquet of babies' breath, her head tilted slightly as she gave him a soft, reassuring smile. He looked so pure, so fragile in the white silk gown that had been tailored to Isabel's measurements. But for the first time, Ethan noticed how the dress bunched awkwardly at her waist, how the hem dragged in the dirt because she was too short for it. It was a stolen dress, and it didn't fit Ethan. Vanessa's voice was like a silver bell, sweet and light, as she took a step down from the altar. Is everything okay? The priest is waiting. My mother is still in the recovery ward. She's waiting to hear the news of our vows. Ethan didn't answer. He slowly lowered the phone, his face a mask of pale, rigid stone. Mr. Harrison. The assistant's voice was still screaming from the speaker of the phone, barely audible but piercingly clear. There's more. The transplant. Vanessa's mother's body rejected the organ 30 minutes after the surgery. Her late-stage lung cancer had already compromised her immune system. The chief surgeon said. He said the transplant was a medical impossibility from the start. She passed away 10 minutes ago. The phone slipped from Ethan's fingers, clattering loudly against the polished marble floor of the chapel. The sound echoed through the high-vaulted ceiling like a gunshot. Ethan? Vanessa's smile finally faltered. She took another step toward him, her hands reaching out to clutch his sleeve. What's wrong? You look so pale. Is it company business? We can postpone the banquet, but we should at least finish the vows. Ethan looked down at her hands. Her fingers, manicured and smooth, were grasping the expensive wool of his suit. In his mind, a sudden brutal image flashed. Isabel kneeling in the dirt outside the hospital entrance, her fingers raw and bleeding as she tried to gather the shattered fragments of her mother's jade bracelet. He remembered how he had swatted her hand away, how he had told her that wearing a dead person's things is unlucky. And then he remembered her face in the emergency room. She had been so thin. Her collarbones stood out like sharp ridges under her faded shirt. Her eyes, once bright and filled with an unconditional devotion that had sustained him through his bankruptcy, had been dull, dark, and utterly empty. Who wants your money? I want the heart. Give me back the heart. She hadn't been screaming out of jealousy. She had been screaming for her life. And he had called security to drag her out into the cold. Ethan? Vanessa's voice grew sharper, a hint of genuine panic creeping into her eyes as she noticed his silence. Where is she? Ethan whispered, his voice so cold it seemed to freeze the air between them. Who? My mother? She's in the... Isabel, Ethan roared, his hand violently ripping away from Vanessa's grasp. The force of his movement sent her stumbling back, her white veil snagging on a pew and tearing with a sharp, high-pitched rip. Where is Isabel? The smell of cheap clinical disinfectant and stale rain hung heavily in the air. At the entrance of the city's public hospital, Ethan's luxury sedan screamed to a halt at the curb, its tires leaving thick black streaks on the wet asphalt. He didn't even turn off the engine before throwing the door open and sprinting into the lobby, his wedding suit rumpled, the white rose boutonniere long since trampled underfoot. Isabel Sullivan, he yelled, slamming his hands onto the reception desk, startling the young nurse behind the counter. Where is she? She was brought here a week ago. She was in the emergency room. The nurse flinched, her eyes wide with fear as she looked at the wild, bloodshot eyes of the powerful tycoon. She quickly tapped on her keyboard, her fingers shaking. I don't see an Isabel Sullivan in our active wards, sir, she stammered. Look again. Ethan bellowed, his voice echoing off the sterile walls of the lobby. She has myocardial disease. She was supposed to have a transplant. He collapsed right outside these doors. A senior doctor in a white coat walked out of a nearby corridor, his face grim, as he recognized Ethan. Mr. Harrison, the doctor said, his voice flat and professional. Please lower your voice. This is a hospital, not your corporate boardroom. Doctor. Ethan lunged forward, grabbing the older man by his lapels. Isabel, my wife. Where is she? Tell me she's in a private ward. Tell me you found another heart for her. The doctor slowly, deliberately reached down and removed Ethan's hands from his coat. There was no respect in the doctor's eyes, only a profound, freezing contempt. Your wife, Mr. Harrison, was dragged out of our operating theater by your private security guards under your direct written order, the doctor said, his voice quiet but carrying the force of a physical blow. She collapsed on the concrete step outside. By the time our emergency staff reached her, her heart had been in a state of arrest for over 15 minutes due to extreme stress and lack of oxygen. Ethan's heart seemed to stop. The world around him tilted, the bright, fluorescent lights of the lobby spinning into a nauseating blur of white and gray. No, he whispered, his knees trembling. No, she's tough. She survived the basement with me. She survived the cold water. She can't. Be. We managed to stabilize her vital signs after 40 minutes of continuous resuscitation, the doctor continued, his tone devoid of any comfort. But her brain had been deprived of oxygen for too long, and her myocardial tissue was completely necrotic. She was placed on life support in the intensive care unit. Then she's still alive. Ethan gasped, a sudden, desperate hope flare up in his chest. I'll pay for the best specialists. I'll fly in the top surgeons from Boston, from Switzerland. I have the money. I'll buy the entire hospital. The doctor let out a short, bitter laugh. You're too late, Mr. Harrison. 3 days ago, a private medical evacuation team from the Sullivan Group in Switzerland arrived with a legally binding power of attorney signed by Mrs. Harrison herself. They disconnected her from our life support system and transferred her to an international medical flight. Ethan blinked, confused. The Sullivan Group? What is that? Isabel doesn't have any family left. Her mother passed away. The Sullivan Group is one of the largest medical research conglomerates in Europe, Mr. Harrison, the doctor said, looking at him as if he were a complete idiot. They were founded by Isabel's maternal grandfather. She was the sole heiress to the entire estate. She didn't need your money. She never did. Ethan fell back against the reception desk, his hands sliding uselessly off the polished counter. If you really mind, I'll have someone else pretend with Vanessa. He had told her, and she had looked at him with those dull, dead eyes and said, I don't mind. She hadn't minded because she had already given up on him. She had already signed her own rescue, or her own death warrant, completely independent of his wealth. Where did they take her? Ethan croaked, his throat so dry it felt like it was coated in ash. Which hospital in Switzerland? I'll buy a plane ticket right now. I don't know, the doctor said, turning his back on him. And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. You stole her heart to give it to a woman who was already dying of cancer, Mr. Harrison. As far as the medical community is concerned, you are her executioner. The mansion was dark when Ethan finally returned. He didn't turn on the lights. He walked through the empty, silent rooms like a ghost, his steps heavy and uneven. The scent of Isabel's favorite lavender soap still lingered in the hallway, but it was faint, being slowly suffocated by the expensive, heavy French perfume that Vanessa had sprayed in the master bedroom. He walked into his study and sat down at his desk. In the center of the desk, surrounded by a scatter of corporate reports and financial statements, lay the document he had signed a week ago. He had signed it in a fit of rage, believing that Isabel was using their son and her mother's keepsake to extort him for company shares. He had thrown the document at her face and told her, I won't tolerate you using the same tricks a second time. Ethan reached out, his hand shaking as he picked up the papers. The title on the cover page was not Stock Transfer Agreement. In bold, black letters, it read, Divorce and Division of Assets Agreement. Ethan's eyes scanned the pages. Isabel had drafted it with meticulous care. She didn't ask for his company. She didn't ask for his family's properties. She had only requested the exact amount of money he had transferred to her over the past month, the price tag she had put on her things, the membership fee for the passenger seat, the fee for their wedding anniversary, and the $5 million for the adoption of their son. And at the very bottom, in his own bold, aggressive handwriting, was his signature. He had signed away his marriage. He had legally declared himself divorced. And, because he had signed it willingly and without reading, the document had been automatically registered by her lawyers the very next day. Isabel Ethan whispered, his head dropping onto the cold mahogany desk. He remembered the basement they had lived in 5 years ago. He remembered how she had saved the single, discounted hamburger for him, claiming she wasn't hungry, while her stomach rumbled in the dark. He remembered how he had held her, crying, promising her that once he made a comeback, he would build her a palace. He had built the palace. But he had let another woman move in, and he had let his own son throw his wife's only keepsake into the dirt. The door to the study opened softly. Ryan, his 4-year-old son, stood in the doorway, clutching a stuffed dinosaur. His little face was pale, his eyes wide with a sudden, uncharacteristic fear. "Dad," Ryan whispered. "Where's Mommy?" Vanessa said Mommy went away because she's a bad person who doesn't love us anymore. Is that true? Ethan looked at his son. This was the child Isabel had given up her promotion for, the child she had spent 2 hours every morning preparing organic, nutritious meals for, the child she had held in her arms when he was sick, singing him to sleep with her soft, tired voice. And his son had looked at her and said, "I don't want you as my mean mom. Anyway." "She's not a bad person, Ryan," Ethan said, his voice cracking with a sudden, violent sob. We are the bad people." Ryan blinked, confused and frightened by his father's tears. But Vanessa said Mommy sold me for $5 million. She said Mommy didn't want me because she wanted the money." "She didn't sell you, Ryan." Ethan wept, pulling his son into his arms, clutching the boy's small, warm body against his chest. "She gave you what you wanted. You said you wanted Vanessa as your real mom. So she let you go." Ryan's little fingers clutched Ethan's collar. For the first time, a flash of genuine, terrible guilt crossed the child's face. He remembered the day before. Yesterday, when he had thrown the jade bracelet at his mother's feet. He remembered the sharp, brittle sound of the jade shattering on the tile, and he remembered the way his mother had knelt in the dirt, her shoulders shaking as she wept silently. "Daddy," Ryan whimpered. I want Mommy back. Tell Mommy I'm sorry. I won't push her anymore. I won't call Vanessa Fairy anymore." "She's not coming back, Ryan." Ethan sobbed into his son's hair. "She's gone." 6 months passed. The city of Jetland remained as bustling and cold as ever, but the Harrison group was undergoing a silent, agonizing collapse. Ethan had spent millions hiring the top private investigators, corporate intelligence firms, and international search teams to locate Isabel. He had traced the medical evacuation flight to a private clinic in Zurich, but when his lawyers arrived, they were met with a wall of legal injunctions and non-disclosure agreements. The Sullivan Group's legal team was a leviathan compared to his local real estate company. They didn't just reject his inquiries, they launched a systematic, ruthless short attack on his company's stock, retaliating for his medical interference. Within half a year, the Harrison Group's market value had plummeted by 60%. Vanessa, who had moved into the mansion as the pretend wife to appease her dying mother, was now finding the reality of her position far less glamorous than she had imagined. There was no grand wedding. The ceremony had been halted, and Ethan had refused to reschedule it. He hadn't touched her once. He slept in the study locked away, with a bottle of scotch and Isabel's old faded clothes, while Vanessa was left alone in the vast, freezing master bedroom. "Ethan." Vanessa stormed into the study one evening, her face contorted in anger. She was wearing a silk bathrobe, one that Isabel had left behind, but she looked small and cheap in it. "This has to stop. It's been 6 months. Your company is failing, the bank is threatening to foreclose on this mansion, and you haven't even looked at me. I did everything for you. I stayed by your side when your family went bankrupt." Ethan slowly raised his head from a bottle of whiskey. His hair was long and unkempt, his beard rough, his eyes hollow and bloodshot. "You stayed by my side because your father had just cut off your allowance. Vanessa," he said, his voice flat and dead. "You came back to me only after I became successful. Isabel was the one who lived in the basement with me. Isabel was the one who sold her car to pay for my first office lease. She's dead, Ethan." Vanessa shrieked, her voice high and grating. "The doctors said her heart was necrotic. She probably died on that plane before it even landed in Switzerland. Why are you letting a dead woman ruin our lives?" "Get out," Ethan said quietly. "No, I won't get out," Vanessa screamed, lunging forward and grabbing his sleeve. "I'm your wife now. The social media posts, everyone knows we're together. You have to support me. My credit cards were declined today at the boutique." "I said get out," Ethan roared, standing up and violently shoving her back. Vanessa stumbled, her heel catching on the edge of the carpet, sending her crashing into the display case. A collection of crystal glassware, the ones Isabel had carefully chosen for their home, shattered onto the floor around her. "Ah!" Vanessa screamed, clutching her arm where a small piece of glass had scratched her skin. You hit me. I'm going to tell Ryan. He hates her anyway. He'll never forgive you. Mommy. Ryan stood in the doorway. He was 5 now, but he looked small, thin, and pale. He didn't look at Vanessa's scratched arm. He looked at the shattered glass on the floor, then at Vanessa's face. Over the past 6 months, without Isabel's gentle, patient presence, the house had become a war zone. Vanessa would lose her temper with him whenever Ethan wasn't looking. She had thrown away his favorite toys because they cluttered her aesthetic, and she had refused to cook for him, leaving him to eat processed delivery food every night. Ryan. Vanessa quickly put on a tearful, victimized expression, reaching out to him. Look what your father did to me. He's out of his mind. He's still obsessed with that dead woman. You're not my mom, Ryan said quietly, his voice devoid of any childhood warmth. You're a bad person. You stole my mommy's dress. You stole her bracelet. Vanessa's face went rigid. What did you say, you little brat? After everything I've done for you, get out of our house, Ryan whispered, tears streaming down his small face. I don't want you here anymore. I want my mommy. Chapter 10. The International Investor. The annual Jetland Business Summit was held at the Grand Regency Hotel, a glittering palace of gold leaf and crystal chandeliers. Despite his company's failing finances, Ethan was forced to attend. He needed to find a savior, an international investor willing to inject cash into the Harrison Group to prevent the banks from seizing his assets. He stood in the corner of the grand ballroom, a half-empty glass of champagne in his hand, his suit fitting loosely on his thin frame. Vanessa had insisted on coming, wearing a lavish diamond necklace that she had bought on his corporate card before it was frozen. She stood beside him, her head held high, trying to put on a show of wealth and stability for the cameras. But the other socialites in the room were keeping their distance, whispering behind their silk fans. Ladies and gentlemen, the master of ceremonies announced, his voice booming through the speakers. We are honored to welcome our keynote guest for tonight's summit. Representing the Sullivan Group of Europe, please welcome their newly appointed global chairperson, Dr. Isabel Sullivan. Ethan's glass slipped from his fingers. The crystal shattered on the carpet, the pale gold champagne soaking into the expensive wool, but he didn't notice. His eyes were fixed on the grand double doors at the far end of the ballroom. The door swung open. A woman walked in, flanked by 4 towering bodyguards in dark, immaculate suits. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk, her shoulders draped in a matching velvet cloak. Her hair was styled in an elegant, modern bob, revealing a sharp, healthy face. But the most striking thing about her was her posture. She carried herself with the absolute, unquestionable authority of a queen. And in the center of her chest, visible through the elegant V-neck of her gown, was a thin, pale surgical scar. It was Isabel. Her skin was no longer pale and dry. Her eyes were bright, clear, and filled with a cold, piercing intelligence. She looked healthy, vibrant, and alive. Her chest rose and fell with a steady, strong rhythm. The rhythm of a healthy, transplanted heart that was beating perfectly inside her. Isabel. Ethan whispered, his voice choking as he took a step forward. Vanessa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her face turning a sickly, mottled gray. No, it's a ghost. She was dead. The doctors said she was dead. Isabel walked slowly through the crowd of bowing tycoons and socialites, her gaze scanning the room with absolute indifference. She didn't look like the tired, desperate housewife who had shared a discounted hamburger in a basement. She was the head of a multi-billion-dollar empire, a woman who controlled the fate of entire industries. She stopped in the center of the ballroom, her eyes finally landing on Ethan. Ethan rushed forward, his body shaking, tears streaming down his face as he tried to throw himself at her feet. Isabel, you're alive. Thank God you're alive. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I'll give you everything. I'll buy back the bracelet. The 4 bodyguards instantly stepped forward, their massive frames blocking Ethan, their hands resting on their holstered weapons. Isabel looked down at him. Her expression didn't contain any anger, any hatred, or any sorrow. There was only a vast, freezing indifference, the look a scientist might give to a specimen under a microscope. I'm sorry, sir. Isabel's voice was smooth, clear, and entirely devoid of the raspy fatigue of her past. Do I know you? Chapter 11. The Valuation of a Stranger. The private VIP suite on the top floor of the hotel was silent, save for the hum of the city lights outside. Ethan sat opposite Isabel across a low glass table. He had begged her assistance for a 5-minute meeting, promising to sign over 40% of his company's remaining shares just for a chance to speak with her. Vanessa was waiting outside the door, pacing frantically on the plush carpet. But she wasn't allowed in. Isabel sat in a velvet armchair, a cup of herbal tea in her hands. She looked at the corporate transfer documents Ethan had laid out on the table. 40% of the Harrison Group, she murmured, a faint, cold smile touching her lips. Mr. Harrison, your company is currently facing 3 separate regulatory audits, and your debt-to-equity ratio is well over 200%. To the Sullivan Group, your shares are worth less than the paper they are printed on. I don't care about the shares, Isabel. Ethan wept, his head dropping onto his hands. Take them. Take the company. Take the mansion. Just please talk to me. Call me Ethan. Tell me you forgive me. Isabel set her teacup down with a soft, quiet clink. Mr. Harrison, I think you are confusing me with someone else, she said, her voice calm and steady. The Isabel you knew, the one who lived in a basement, who dried your clothes with a hairdryer, who let you stomp on her mother's memories. She died on the concrete step of that public hospital. The heart you stole from her was the final payment for her foolishness. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his with a force that made his breath catch. The heart beating inside me now was flown in from Zurich. It was funded by my own grandfather's estate. I don't owe you my love, my forgiveness, or my anger. To me, you are simply a poorly managed real estate company in a secondary market. Isabel, please. Ethan sobbed, reaching across the table to grab her hand. But her assistant, a sharp young man, instantly stepped in, swatting his hand away. Mr. Harrison, the assistant said coldly, please maintain professional boundaries. What about Ryan? Ethan cried out, his voice cracked with a desperate, wild panic. He misses you, Isabel. He cries every night. He threw away Vanessa's gifts. He wants his real mom. Isabel's hand paused on her teacup. For a fraction of a second, a flash of something human crossed her eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the same freezing, arctic. Ryan has a new mother, Mr. Harrison, she said quietly. He chose her himself. He told his teacher, the school, and the world that Vanessa was his real mom. And as I recall, I accepted a transfer of $5 million to finalize that adoption. The transaction is complete. The ledger is closed. She stood up, her emerald cloak rustling softly. Our 5 minutes are up, Mr. Harrison. My legal team will handle the restructuring of your company's debt. We will be purchasing your remaining assets at the upcoming liquidation auction next month. Isabel. Ethan lunged forward, but the bodyguards immediately seized his arms, pinning him to the floor. He watched helplessly as she walked toward the private exit, her back straight, her steps light and elegant. No, please. Just look at me once, he screamed. But she didn't turn back. The heavy door clicked shut, leaving him kneeling on the floor, surrounded by the ruin of his own greed. Chapter 12, Epilogue. A healthy beat. The private jet climbed high above the glittering, cold skyscrapers of Jetland, its engines humming a smooth, steady tune. Isabel sat in the spacious leather seat of the cabin, looking out the window. At the city below, the harbor, the corporate towers, the dark streets, all of it seemed so small, like a toy set she had finally outgrown. She reached up, her fingers gently pressing against her collarbone, feeling the strong, steady, and rhythmic beat of her new heart. It was a good heart. It didn't ache when she thought of the past. It didn't flutter with anxiety when she heard his name. It was clean, whole, and entirely hers. The assistant walked over, handing her a tablet. Dr. Sullivan, the liquidation of the Harrison Group is complete. The mansion has been auctioned off to a public park developer. Vanessa Seinfeld has been evicted, and, well, she was arrested this morning for attempting to sell forged corporate bonds to cover her credit debts. Isabel didn't look at the tablet. And the child? Ryan is currently enrolled in a boarding school in the northern province, funded by his father's remaining personal pension, the assistant said. Mr. Harrison has relocated to a small, rented room in the lower-income district. He reportedly spends his days delivering food on a bicycle. Isabel turned her head back to the window. The clouds were thick now, a vast, white blanket that completely erased the city of Jetland from her sight. She took a deep, clean breath, the fresh air filling her lungs, her heart beating with a perfect, quiet serenity. She had paid the price for her love in her past life. In this life she would live only for herself. Close the blinds, please, she said softly. It's time to go home.